in HR 40 years ago, a person who maybe have identified with neurodiversity
Yes.
or may have experienced mental health, we chalked
Yep.
that up as bad behavior. And we didn't,
So true.
it was just bad behavior. That was bad performance. And we don't want that in our workplace. And so,
Right.
right. And how did the individuals there, how were they, who looked out for them? And
So
so
true.
when you start having these conversations and now saying more individuals in the workplace can thrive, it saddens me that we're just so fixated, or
Yes.
I'm gonna say fixated. The race card has just led everything into this,
I totally
then followed
agree.
by gender. So
No.
I'm
And it's so unfortunate, exactly to your point, because I think, like, and now what I'll hear sometimes, and I'm curious about your thoughts about this, is like the combat to that is, well, I just want to hire the most qualified person into the
I
workforce. That's the big thing, and that's the way to kind of combat the whole idea of what we were talking about with equity, inclusion, belonging, and all of that, was to say, well, we just want to hire the most qualified people. It shouldn't be about any of those things, right? The problem with that is that the most qualified people aren't always recognized when you don't have a
correct.
diverse, equitable, inclusive, and belonging environment, right? Welcome to the new chapter of the Her Resources podcast. I'm your host, Linda Misegadis, and I'm so excited to be stepping into this next season with you solo. This podcast has always been about amplifying women's voices, exploring the challenges we face in HR, leadership, and life, and sharing the tools and inspiration we need to thrive. And now I'm taking that mission even deeper. You'll hear real conversations with bold and authentic women, as well as reflections from me on everything from pay equity and burnout to confidence, leadership, and the messy, beautiful journey of growth. This is more than just a podcast, it's a community, a space for us to learn, lead, and lift each other up. Welcome to this new beginning. This is the Her Resources Podcast. Let's get started. Hey everyone, I want to introduce our special guest for our podcast today, From Movement to Moment. Stacey Lewis is the founder and CEO of HR Interrupted. HRI is an consultancy firm dedicated to providing expert and proven resources to business thought leaders who have grit to unapologetically disrupt outdated workplace ideologies, principles, and practices that impact the people, business, and culture experience. She is the former Chief Human Resource Officer for the Port of Long Beach, the second busiest seaport in the United States, with approximately 600 employees, and generates annual operating revenue in excess of $300 million. Stacey has over 35 years of professional human resource experience, both in the private and the public sectors. She is a dynamic and highly sought-after transformational speaker and self-proclaimed disruptor. Stacey received her bachelor's degree of psychology from the University of Pacific. She also holds a human resource management certification from Loyola Marymount University, a diversity, equity, and inclusion certification from Cornell, as well as several other HR designations and certifications. Stacey is a former commissioner for the Long Beach Unified School District Personnel Commission and serves on several local boards, including Girls Incorporated of Los Angeles, Inglewood Baseball Fund, and Little Owl Foundation for Childhood Education. Additionally, Stacey is an instructor, program liaison for the Human Resource Management Certification Program at California State University, Long Beach, and is a member of the HR Advisory Committee. She teaches the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion series programs. Stacey is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated. She currently serves in the Theta Alpha Omega chapter as the chair of the Advocate for Social Justice Committee. In addition to being tenacious about her professional career and following her purpose and passion to encourage people, especially women, to live their very best lives, Stacey formerly served as a host on everywaywoman.com, a local cable and internet talk show committed to celebrating everyday women in every way. She also hosted a local radio show on acceleratedradio.net. Her professional, relationship, and parenting expertise and advice have been featured on several websites, publications, and TV shows, including Indeed, the #1 job site in the world, LinkedIn, The Rachel Ray Show, Ebony, Parenting, and Voyage Los Angeles magazine. However, at the end of the day, when the business meetings and interviews have concluded, Stacey finds complete solace in bowling and spending time with her husband of 33 years, their 3 young adult children, and remembering their dog, Louis Vuitton, who is now spending time over the Rainbow Bridge. Today, we're going to dive into a topic that's really been on my mind, and honestly, I think one that's a bit overdue. We're asking what happened to the DEI movement. 3 years ago, corporate America spent billions promising us a revolution. Companies pledged to dismantle inequality, hire chief diversity officers, and splash vibrant, diverse faces across their marketing campaigns. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and sometimes belonging was the movement. But somewhere between the public promise and the private reality, the signals got crossed. The movement got co opted, the energy of change cooled into the complacency of a checkbox exercise, and when the budgets tightened and the backlash began, the commitments we were promised were often the first to go. This isn't a political debate. This is an interrogation of broken business strategies and unfulfilled leadership. How did a critical imperative for human capital and innovation devolve into a brittle marketing tool? Today, we're asking the uncomfortable questions. Who was doing the real work and who was just doing the talking? What happens to trust, talent, and your bottom line when you walk back a public promise? So joining me today is the incomparable Stacey Lewis, founder and CEO of HR Interrupted. And she's here to trace a journey from the moment of reckoning to the mistakes that derailed the progress and, just kind of jump in a little bit and talk about something that nobody's talking about.
Thank you, Linda. I love that. I love that introduction. And I really love the words that you used of co-op, right? And this is not a political interrogation. It's not a political conversation, but it's really
Yeah.
looking at the strengths of that movement at that time. And I don't want to just call DEI a movement because it's been around,
Yeah.
right, for a very long time in
Exactly.
different factions. But 3 years ago, we did see um, a resurrection of the thought because we saw a man murdered on TV. It could be debatable. E- Again, people are entitled to their own thoughts and opinions, but a
Right.
reasonable person would probably say that we saw this gentleman murdered on TV and America started reckoning with that. But I don't want to get into all that. So I just wanted to say I love the word that you use, co-op, and I love that we're
Thank
approaching
you.
this from not a political debate, but really
Yeah.
unpacking what happened and ensuring that irrespective of the words that used, the work goes forward because the need to ensure the workplace is still needed, will always be needed. And quite frankly, now we're seeing some of the aftermaths of what it looks like when the pendulum has switched totally to a different side. So I'm excited
So
for us to talk.
true. Yeah, thank you so much. Well, and it before DEI became a corporate buzzword, kind of to your point, you were already doing the work. So can you take us a little bit, like take us back to what it looked like before 2020 and what DEI was really about then? Because to your point, this wasn't new. None of it was new. It just became, unfortunately, I feel like more of a corporate marketing messaging versus really where the real work was being done. So can you talk a little bit about like what did it really look like?
Sure. I love this question, Linda. So I'm an HR practitioner of over 40 years, right? So I started when it was called personnel. And at that
Right.
time, equity work was placed in, and I'm going to speak from my experience and those who've been in HR a long time. I hope, they'll have the same experience.
Absolutely.
I was working in equity work when it was part of compliance. It was just put in HR. There wasn't necessarily equity officers and offices of, you know, racial and social justices. It was just put in HR. And the majority of it was done from compliance. This was back when, there was conversation about affirmative action. And
Mhm.
so there was talk about it and it was viewed more so as quotas, right? But there's a difference between affirmative action and equity, right? But more so quotas from hiring. And even in that space, um, you know, I take a different position, but that we'll just stop there because I don't want to get controversial so early. But so that's where it was. So it's always been there. It has always been a in some emphasis. You've kept it in compliance. We really weren't as outward as we are about social. What is an organization stance socially, right? Um,
Yeah.
Workers finding their voices. Really, this was the change. Workers finding their voices and saying, these things matter to me. And because I
Right.
give you a lot of time, I need to know from an organization's perspective, where do you stand? Right. That just wasn't the face of work. And to your point, I think a lot of it is workers started finding their voice. So I don't want to leave the notion that just somehow 3 years ago, this whole thing of DEI
Yes.
came, especially for new era leaders coming into the workplace. I hate to use
Yeah.
these terms, Gen Z, Gen Y, Alpha. I don't know all that. There's just the new era of leaders coming into the
Yeah.
workplace. I think understanding the history is important. Now, voices were amplified. Again, been working for 40 years. There was a
Mhm.
time, and I applaud this. I never thought I'd see in the workplace where there was conversations about who Stacey Lewis was as a person, as opposed to
Yeah.
Stacey Lewis being the person who just counts your widgets, right?
Right.
It truly was, you do this for me and I do that for you, right? I was
Right.
just a number. And so we're going to talk about the pendulum today. The pendulum was more so on one side where the employer had for lack of a better word, we're going to use this power. And you came to work for you to get your paycheck. You did what your employer said do, and you didn't ask questions. I don't care about who you love. I don't care about who you like. I don't care
Mhm.
about who you think you are, want to be, could be, maybe. None of that. I'm not interested in that. All I know
Right.
is at the end of the week, have my 50 widgets done.
Yes. So true. Yeah.
That's where we were.
Yeah.
And because of rules and governments and, Title VII and all these things, okay, we know we
Mhm.
got to do some of these things, but, so stick it over here. This is real talk.
Right.
And I'm sure some people would debate, but it's just real talk. And I love wonderful debates. So then, it just kind of stayed and it's in HR and, a little bit more paying attention to it, a little bit more. So it's always been there.
Yeah.
3 years ago, I think you can say, you really, we saw the explosion, right? And I say that because let me go back. I don't want to discount any work that people who would do this work have done prior to 2020, right?
Right.
I really, because I think that that's happened. And there are a lot of people who've had boots on the ground in this work, including myself, for a long time. And we're not going to tell the family business, but we had to make sure the work moved forward in ways that were in our power. Decipher
Yes.
that the way you want to. That does not mean, because I know people be like, oh my gosh, she's saying that they just, no, I'm not saying that.
Mhm.
However, we doing this work recognize that back then, that a workplace that is representative of the community and representative of the client, right, is a
Yep.
productive one. So also what happened is not only did workers, but clients and customers started saying, hey, I'll use my company just as safe, HR Interrupted. We
Mhm.
kind of want to know if your workforce looks like the people that we are marketing to, the people that are
Right.
in our communities, right? So now there was a business,
Mhm.
right? You want to make the business case, people want to go back. So
Yep.
that's when voices started amplifying. We get to 2020. You want to say, did you get to, because I'll be talking for friends.
No, no, no. No, I think it's great because I think it is really important to show because what you're talking about is really kind of bringing it from the affirmative action, everything in the 70s. And then to your point, in the 1990s and 2000s, that shift to that business imperative, which is what you're talking about now, where it became less about necessarily the roots of the DEI, what was really going on. If you trace those back to the civil rights movements, it had shifted away from that, right? And now it was more focused in on the business. So yes, please
And
continue.
Linda, and the reason why I say that is because in some individuals' minds, they have
Hmm.
equated equity, with affirmative action. And
Right.
that's part of the challenge. Affirmative action education, there's a lot about education and positions, right, was really about numbers, was really about showing a representation. And people have been stuck there. That's not what equity, that's not how it progressed. And
Right.
unfortunately, people are stuck there. You have to have 5 green people, 6 blue, whatever.
Yes.
And because that has been what has been the narrative
Hmm.
and has appealed to individuals' biases. I mean, if you want to talk straight today, Linda, we'll talk straight. And has
Absolutely.
appealed to people's biases. That's all they see. It's affirmative action. There is not a willingness or the ability. No, I'm not going to say there's the willingness to acknowledge. And these are keywords
Yeah.
I'm using, that there is more to that, right?
Yes.
And we're moving from data to showing what inclusive workforces look like, and
Right.
how when representation, so we're going to call about words because diversity
Yes.
did, and we'll talk about that. But when the workplace is representative of the community, of the talents and skills around, you flourish more. And
Right.
because, and I don't want to be all over, and because this whole narrative is leading with race, we get stuck.
So true.
That
So true.
it everything is leading with race, and we're not it's not only about race. It's not
Right.
only about race, but the race part is what people can see. Mm.
Yes.
The race
Yes.
part is what sometimes aligns with people's biases. Come on, Stacey,
Yeah.
tell the truth, right? And so it's easy to just focus on that piece.
Right.
We've known the expansion is diversity of thought, right?
Yes.
The wonderful, what's the word I want to use? The wonderful way that we have really embraced individuals who process things differently, right?
Yes.
Neuro
Yeah.
inclusiveness, right?
Yep.
Um, we have gender, right? These are external things
Yeah.
that you can see, but the expansion of that, and that's what is that saddens me. That's doing the work, that those important things that when I was in HR 40 years ago, a person who maybe have identified with neurodiversity,
Yes.
or may have experienced mental health, we chalked
Yep.
that up as bad behavior, and we didn't.
So true.
You don't. We It was just bad behavior. That was bad performance, and we don't want that in our workplace. And so,
Right.
right, and how did the individuals there? How were they? Who looked out for them? And
So
so
true.
when you start having these conversations, and now saying more individuals in the workplace can thrive, it saddens me that we're just so fixated, or
Yes.
I'm gonna say fixated. The race card has just led everything into this,
I totally
been followed
agree.
by gender. So
No.
I'm
And it's so unfortunate, exactly to your point, because I think, like, and now what I'll hear sometimes, and I'm curious about your thoughts about this, is like the combat to that. Well, I just want to hire the most qualified person into the
I
workforce. That's the big thing, and that's the way to kind of combat the whole idea of what we were talking about with equity, inclusion, belonging, and all of that. Was to say, well, we just want to hire the most qualified people. It shouldn't be about any of those things, right? The problem with that is that the most qualified people aren't always recognized when you don't have a
correct.
diverse, equitable, inclusive, and belonging environment, right? I have exciting news. The Her Resources podcast is opening sponsorships. If your brand supports women in HR and leadership, think talent, well being, learning, pay equity, coaching, productivity, or mission driven tech. This is your moment. Our listeners are decision makers and change makers who show up for real conversations and practical tools every week. We offer flexible options, pre-roll or mid-roll host reads, series sponsorships, and thought leadership integrations that highlight your story without the fluff. Ready to connect with a highly engaged audience and grow with us? Email contact@herresourcespodcast.com and put sponsorship in the subject line. I can't wait to collaborate.
Right. And I love that, the most qualified. So I'll tell a story. Um, I had the honor, this is what I do, and I had the honor. And I was just doing a presentation not too long ago. And one of the things I will say, Linda, that I'm glad that you're doing, and I'm hoping that individuals are having, but I've really been fortunate to be in spaces with individuals where we've set environments. So I'm going to say I'm not too much of a fan of safe spaces. Let me tell you why.
Yeah,
And I think I said it. A space is not safe until it's tested. Okay. And so we tell a person, bring me your whole, everything that you're thinking about. And
yes,
some of the things are very intimate. And then I'm irresponsible with that. I can do
right.
more harm and charge more trauma.
So true.
What I like to create is spaces where Linda and Stacey feel brave enough to be authentic and vulnerable to the level that they choose, because it's always a choice. I don't get to tell
Yes.
a person, but you'd have to do. No, I don't do that. And
Yeah.
through that, there is a level of safety where they can ask questions, have healthy debate, free of judgment, free of retribution, free of retaliation, free of making them feel like there's something wrong. So
Right.
that's what I endeavor to do. And I will say I'm fortunate and grateful to be able to engage in that. So recently, I created one of those spaces. And a gentleman there, we're talking about qualify, who identifies, and he identifies as a white cisgender male.
Okay.
He said to me, he said, Stacey, it's really difficult these days being a white man in America.
Okay.
And, as doing this work, I had to gut check,
Mhm.
right? We
Yeah.
gotta be, if we're gonna be this, we can be honest, because I had to immediately manage my bias. Cause my first thought
Right.
is, what? However,
Right.
if I'm gonna do this, if I'm, I can't be a hypocrite. So
That's true.
I asked him, I said, can we unpack that? And he goes, I would
Yeah.
like to do that in the room. And there's probably about 30 people in the room. And I said, unpack that for me. I'm really interested because I saw the eye rolls in the room and the people
For
disengaging.
sure.
And that's the problem. See, if it
Yes.
doesn't, that's why we're here. If it don't align with me, then it's a
Exactly.
problem.
Yep.
And I'm not going to let that happen in my space.
Yeah.
So he said, well, I've been, racially discriminated against. And I said, please share your story. And he said,
Yeah.
I went out to be a firefighter and
Okay.
I wasn't hired. And I said, okay, what happened? And he said, well, they were doing some type of a affirmative action thing. So they were hiring Black and brown people. So I
Ugh.
said, can I stop you now? He said,
Mhm.
yes. And I said, we put our community agreements because I wanted us to have a
Yeah.
healthy, so we put some community agreements on the floor. And I said, your statement was you were not hired, and they hired Black and brown because they were doing some type of a quote affirmative action. Did it ever dawn on you? No, I said, why did you immediately move to affirmative action? Right? You didn't say
Right.
you now qualified. Like, why
Yep.
did you immediately say there was affirmative action? And he had this look in his face with me. Like, what do you mean? I said, did it dawn on you that those individuals could have been qualified outside of affirmative action?
Right.
Right? And he wanted to dabble around, what else could it be? But I think he read the room, right? And, and I appreciated he goes, I got to think about that. And I said, I said, first of all, I applaud you, right? Thank you for
Yes.
putting that feeling, you know,
Yeah.
very
Brave enough, courageous. Yeah. To say
right.
it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So when we talk about qualified from this perspective, what that means is when you say we want to hire the most qualified person, a person who identifies as you're going to automatically get the benefit of the doubt that you're qualified.
Absolutely. So true.
Automatically get the benefit of
Mhm.
the doubt that you are qualified.
Yes.
You know what he said? He said, I never thought about that. See, I know this works, Linda. I know
Yes,
when people take the time and the motive, your agenda is right. It changed the whole court and entered into a very healthy. And he goes, I never thought about that. I said, you automatically get the benefit of the doubt that you're qualified.
that's
But
right.
when I show up, right, I'm not given that.
No,
I'm not
no,
given that. And he said, I never thought about that. And I could be as qualified, but you yourself, and I want to use your example, you immediately lean to whatever your lived experiences, your bias were,
that's
that
right.
somehow those individuals hired because there was some type of a help. And he
Yes.
said, he goes, I never thought about that. And so that whole qualified piece, here's another thing that I
Yeah.
want to put out that I think will, I hope it doesn't mess with your ratings, but
If it does, there were the wrong people listening anyway.
also when you talk about that statement of we want to hire the most qualified, here's something that I've been talking about in the people in my circle. And,
Mhm.
I think whether we want to agree with it or not, the systems, the systemic systems that have
Mhm.
been created
Yes.
to create barriers are real. Okay. And I've been processing this. And because of that,
Mhm.
the individuals who tend to benefit from those systems have a difficult time of understanding how others can without help.
Yes.
You see
So
what I mean?
true.
It's so true,
I do. Yes.
right? There's a challenge. Well, how could they without some type of a help? Because we know what it's like.
Right.
These
Right.
are healthy conversations, and I don't see anything wrong with having them. This don't have
Mm-mm.
anything about being racist or anything. It's about having an understanding of how we got here. And
Right.
to your point, because one thing we're going to talk about, what do we do wrong in this work? I will never back down from this. I don't care. You can send me email, whatever. You don't have to accept. Here's the word. Listen to the word I'm using, Linda. Anything.
So true.
But what you must do in the workplace or in the workplace, what you gotta do is
Sure.
at least acknowledge that Stacy has a different lived experience.
Yes.
Linda has a different lived experience.
Yes.
You have to bare minimum acknowledge that I have a different lived experience, even if you don't understand it. And what has happened is we have lost the willingness to have intellectual curiosity. We're not curious about each other anymore.
So true.
It's just
That is
Linda
so
don't look
true.
like me, and a person who did something like who looked like Linda did me wrong, so I don't even want to deal with Linda. Now,
Right.
I'm not going to diminish people's experiences because I've had but that
Absolutely.
curiosity about who we are. And that gentleman, I mean, that led into a whole conversation about like curiosity when I was saying, you're given the benefit of the doubt. And so
Yeah.
what happened then is he goes, okay. So he goes, well, give me another example. I said, oh, I'll give you one. I am raising a Black son in America.
Yeah.
Okay? You could believe this or not. Since my son was 3 years old, we have talked to them about how he should respectfully engage with the police.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might not have to have that conversation with your son.
So true.
The
It
room
is
was
so
quiet
true.
because your son is probably going more likely than mine. Son will get the benefit of the doubt. My
Absolutely.
son will do everything that we will tell him. Hands on the steering wheel, be respectful. Watch your mouth. Anybody in the car, tell them to shut their mouth. Listen to police. And my
Mhm.
son still might not come home.
So true.
And
So
then
true.
it was like, well, you're making I said, no, I'm not making a blanket. I'm just telling you,
Mm.
you asked me. You asked
That's
me
right.
that. Did you?
Yeah.
And I said, well, let's talk. Have you talked to your son about the conversation with police? And I think he's married to, I think he was married to, or maybe a woman who identifies as a person of color. And he said, we've had some kind of
Okay.
conversations, but I will tell you that my friends have not. I said, that's all that I'm saying. That's
Yep.
you get the benefit of the doubt.
That's right.
And all I'm
That's right.
asking you to do is you don't have to agree with, but and just at least acknowledge. All you
Yeah,
have to do is acknowledge when somebody says that, as opposed to bringing that's not true. They don't do. How do you know? Like I
exactly.
can't tell you that you were not. You said you were racially discriminated because you were not a firefighter.
Right.
Who am I to tell you that that didn't happen? I can't say
That's
that.
right.
I can
Yeah,
make some
no,
assumptions based on
sure.
my biases, based on my experience. That ain't right. I can't tell you
Yep,
that. I got to acknowledge that that is your reality. We've lost the
absolutely.
ability to be curious about each
Are you ready to take your podcast to the next level? Let LJM Productions help you sound your best. We specialize in podcast editing, production, audio restoration, and mixing, ensuring every episode is polished, professional, and ready to wow your audience. Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned podcaster, we'll handle the technical details so you can focus on sharing your voice. Partner with LJM Productions today and hear the difference.
That is so, so true. Well, and I wonder too, like, so much of it got caught up in the woke trap too, right? Where it became, DEI became a politicized catch-all for everything, and especially critics, and then even some of the conservative activists that were out there, they just kind of co-opted as a synonym for woke, making any companies hesitant to even use the word diversity. We saw that happen. I started to watch companies removing the word diversity, and then it became inclusion, equity, and belonging before it all went away. But diversity slowly started to get moved, and it was because people were so afraid of what I think is like the woke trap that was out there. All of a sudden, we were, we were all woke, and that was being overly used and definitely politicized for sure.
I agree. Here's what I will say. One of the things that you and I talked about is what happened. I have a very dear uh, colleague. In doing this work, Linda, I'm intentional about who I surround myself with.
Sure,
I
you'd have
can't
to be,
speak
right?
to being right. I can't speak to what it's like to be a white cisgender male. So I surround myself with individuals who will be who we have, right? And
Yeah,
we have these conversations. I have a very good person's name is Justin Gray. And we met through doing some equity work. And um he and I, because he's talked to me about, Stacey, what is, walk me through this. I don't understand. And these are the type
right.
of relationships we have. And I've reached out to him. Me and
Yeah,
him were talking about this piece. And one of the things that he said, because I asked him, I said, Justin, um, walk me through I have a perspective, but walk me through this. And he said it and he validated, he said, it came in as gangbusters. It
yeah,
was, we didn't have a choice. We saw this thing happen and it was almost rammed down our throats.
yeah,
Whether we agree with it or not, again, because again, if you want to be curious about another individual, it may not
right,
be your experience, it may not be your opinion, however,
right.
that is what's happened. And
So
so,
true. It is. Yeah.
right? So we were I'm going to speak way over here to the left, right? And I don't want, let me not even
Yeah.
left. Let me not lay left or right. We were way to one side. The pendulum was
That's
at one
right.
side. Oh my
Way
God.
over here. That's
We were
right.
way over here, right? Okay. And what happened now is, because I'm going to go on what you're saying about companies.
Yeah.
What happened was now, and Justin said it so wonderfully, he said, now, Stacey, what happened is because of all of whatever was felt, we've gone all the way to the other side. And now the other
So
side
true.
is not only did you do us wrong, but now we're going to one up you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We're going to
Yeah.
one up you.
Mhm.
So you were all over here. Now we're going to go over
Yep.
here. And now we're going to one up you. I said,
Yeah.
if that's not true. So in this, talking about that, the diversity piece of it, and I use this with my clients now, even I said, we talk about representation because that's really what we want. We want the workplace to
Agree.
be representative of everybody.
Yes.
And two,
Yes.
when you say representation, people now cannot necessarily make the argument because they, call up the word diversity. Diversity just means
Right.
Diversity just means different individuals in the background. It don't mean that
That's
it's
it.
everybody, right? But since they, want to, representation is everybody. Okay. So, a representative space. Talking to Justin and others, people were telling me, like Stacey, for example, HR told me
Mhm.
that, called me and told me I don't have my pronouns on the emails. That's a problem for some people
Yes. Yeah.
because I'm not preventing an individual who wants to identify as their pronouns, right? I'm not going to
Yes.
stop that, but that might not be what I want to do, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So what happened was in the moment of, and this is general, in the moment of we got this moment, right? We're going to do what we can to really ensure that people are seen, right? And we may have somehow forgot about maybe those who weren't there because we're
Yes.
experiencing now. Because now we've moved to this other side where
Yes.
there's not appears to be a care. We're feeling it. We don't care nothing about you. You see, we're feeling it
Yep.
on this side. We don't care nothing about
Yes.
you.
Yep.
We ain't gonna even put people in the front that look like you. That's how one up we
Yes.
going. Okay.
That is so true.
That's
Yes.
the one up we going. We going one up that you ain't gonna even see anybody who
Right.
remotely resembles you in any of on the big stage. I'll just call it the big
Yeah.
stage.
Yeah.
So
That
on
is
this
true.
side, put your pronoun, whatever it is, but I just use that because that's what I've heard in the
Yep.
genders and all those things. So now we're here.
Yes.
And so that is, I think, what happened, not intentional per se, but just because you didn't intend to do it doesn't mean it didn't happen. Over
It's true.
here, right? I think there's a little bit more intentionality on this side, right? Where
I
the
think so
pendulum has
too.
moved this side, there's actually a little bit
Mhm.
more intentionality, right? And so I think that is what happened. The statement got hijacked. Woke doesn't even mean that, right? Woke just means people are paying attention, right? Right.
Yes.
They're not sleeping on issues. They're understanding. They're alert to matters that
Yeah.
are happening and being engaging with it. That's what it means, right? But because,
Right.
like you said, I love what you said, Linda, that term got hijacked for anything that was, liberal or again, I don't want to use the word
Yes.
or anything that was out there that was different than what was believed. That's how you got there. So I think that is what
Yeah.
happened. And in having a conversation, it really was not an intent to isolate, especially the demographic of white
I
cisgender
agree.
males, because
Yeah.
in reality, that demographic has always been. Remember that benefit of the doubt. They've always been.
Yes.
It's always
They
we
have.
could not. I mean, people don't like this, but they've always been in a place of to impact, change, impact power.
Yes.
It was we need you, and my relationship with Justin is one. Justin is Justin had an organization. Justin and I worked together, and Justin was like, just working with Justin. I was like, Justin, this is not going to move forward unless you're the leader here. He goes, no, I understand this, and I want to make sure that he used the word, and I know people kind of get offended by it, but that's his word. He goes, my tribe,
Yeah.
my employees, we're homogenous in our perspective, and I want everybody to be involved in that. And I want you to come in and make sure that we're doing that from a place of inclusiveness, right? He was involved in the movement, right? I
Yes.
guess you would say I hate the movement. He was involved, right? We weren't going any further than that. And so I don't know if a good enough job was done to say,
Yes.
right, we'll isolate you. Now, we're going to talk straight. Some people are like, oh my gosh, they're always whining. It's always about them.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're gonna tell a story, I tell a story. That is a perspective. Here we go,
Yeah.
another thing here, I was whining. So then now you get to this side, and okay, so you think
Mhm.
we were whining. Okay, I'm gonna show you what whining looks like. Not only do we got it all, and you ain't gonna never
Yes.
be back here again.
Yeah.
I
It's
mean,
so true. No, it
they're gonna
is.
send
It
you, they're
is
gonna
true.
send you your little stuff on your podcast. You just tell them she ain't coming back. No, but we not have this is a conversation we gotta have.
We have to have these conversations. Oh my God, it is so true. Well, and there was a McKinsey study. They tracked that more than 60 billion in corporate pledges toward racial equity were made, but much of that never translated into any measurable change. And
Mhm.
then now, like where we are today, we had all of the statements and the campaigns and the hashtags and everything, but there was no infrastructure in place, right, to
Right.
support this because it was all just a lot of marketing fluff. And now DEI job postings are down more than 40% since 2022. And when they did the whole big shift to when we started to see the layoffs and everything happening, some of the very first jobs to be eliminated, I mean, almost all those chief diversity officer jobs have all been, they've all been let go.
Linda, we could we could make this 2 times to Sunday. We could just spend this all we want to. It is unfortunate, but it's
Yeah.
just the reality. The equity work, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, all the things we're seeing is being driven by race, period.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because of that, America, or however you want to, again, I don't want to get political,
Right.
but we got to
Yep.
atone for that, right? It's
Yep.
just being driven by race. It is
Yes.
solely being driven by race. And that's the unfortunate part about it because it is so much more. But people they can put their eyes on race and they
Yes.
can put their biases on race and they can
Right.
put their feelings on race. And,
So true.
America, I don't want to get into the history, but race drove a lot of things of decisions that
Yes,
have
it
been made.
did.
It has not changed. And that's what's the sad part about this.
I
And that,
agree.
but it's just, there's so many people who benefit. I worked for an organization where our IT manager was literally legally blind. I was so honored when he was hired because I
Right?
knew there was a time he would not even be considered in the
So
work that
true.
I'm doing. I work with so many clients who are having conversations, healthy conversations about how do we look at, how do we embrace and create newer inclusive organizations, right? How we're doing that.
Yes.
How are we managing mental health crisis? How in the
Yes.
workplace? How are we from an inclusive perspective? How are
Mhm.
we managing um, people who may be in caregiver modes? Like, see, we relegate to
Yes.
the grace, but you're taking care of your family. You are still working. You have all these like all of that is creating inclusive environments. You may not have a partner at home, and you have 4 children, and then your parent has cancer. Like all of this is in this
Yes.
in this representation, equity, and inclusion. Right? You
Yep.
have a person in the military, you've lost a child. You're battling with cancer. I'm a cancer survivor. Like, right? So all of these things that people bring to the workplace is part of
Yes.
the conversation. But because we only want to focus on this one thing that makes people feel like they got the one up, all these other entities are disadvantaged. And that breaks
So
my
true.
heart in this work. And these are the
Does.
conversations we need to have, and don't nobody want to have them because you know
Mm-mm.
why? When you start unpacking it like this, if you true to the game, you got to
Mhm.
look at your own biases. You got to
Yes,
look
you
at your
do.
own bias. See, it's okay to say we don't want to hire Stacey because she identifies as an Afro-Latina woman or Black, whatever, and so she not. But when we talk about somebody who looks like you,
Mhm.
who's still disadvantaged,
Yep.
then that looks a little bit different.
I agree with you. It's so true. Well, and we're starting to see so much of it. And what was sad about it is that as part of what was going on with this, focus on equity, inclusion, belonging, and we started to see a lot more employee resource groups, right? So they had been around for a number of years, but it was kind of like in the shadows. People were like, oh, but then we really started to see this embracing. What I've seen is even a little bit of a pullback there, is because that's exactly to your point, is that we still have these employee, like even at our organization, we have all these employee resource groups. And at one point, they really kind of sat front and center to make employees feel
Mhm.
good about, and it was about all the things you were talking about. There's a caregiver, there's one for parents who are dealing with children with special needs
Yes,
children,
absolutely.
um, to your point, even we're seeing a big push on women's issues around menopause and perimenopause and the things that
Yes.
women go through. But all of that, to your point, is getting pushed down again because we're
Mhm.
so afraid to talk about
Right.
this whole conversation we're having right now because, exactly to your point, it leans back into something that people want to make it instead of what it really is.
Exactly. And those employee resource groups, and that's why I say doing this work, and thank you for that. Linda, I've been doing this work for a long time, and I'm honest, I never thought we'd see the day where we would have resources in the workplace for individuals who are managing their home, right?
Yes.
Also, I think what may help this, and I'm hoping that this helps, one of the tenets of my company, HR Interrupted, is that work is a relationship. When I
Yeah.
work with my clients, it's a relationship, and I really take them through my own relationship. I've been married to my husband for 33 years. What's important to him
Congratulations.
is important. Thank you, is important to me. And what's important to me is important to him. When I started, I told you work used to not be a relationship, is I'm
No.
here, I'm employer,
Yep.
and you're employee.
Yep.
And if you want these coins, if you want the money in the credit union every 2 weeks, you give me my widget.
That's right.
Started changing, right? Right in the pandemic,
Mhm.
you had 4.3 people, retire.
Yep.
Resign, right? Because people are like, I'm not
Yes.
doing this anymore.
Yep.
I think the data was 4.3 or 4.6 million people who resign, right? And so employees started finding their voice and saying,
Yep.
I spent a lot of time at work. I
Right.
spent a lot of time at work, and I'm tired of feeling like the abusive partner in this relationship.
Yes. Yes.
So when work is viewed as a relationship, then
Mhm.
those things that matter on both sides, what's important to the employee should be important to the employer. Conversely, let's don't get it twisted, employees. What's
Yep.
important to the employer has to be important
Yep.
to the employee.
That's right.
Employees, at the end of the day, I'm gonna tell you, the employer has to make money. Okay?
That is right.
If they
That
don't
is
make
right.
money, you don't get coins in the credit union every
No,
2
you
weeks.
don't.
Okay? Okay.
That's
So
right.
while there are some things that they're going to do in the relationship, there are some things that they cannot do. And it don't have nothing
Yeah.
to do with how you look, how you feel. It don't have
Yes.
nothing to do with that. It's just business.
Yes.
Okay?
Exactly. Yeah.
Employer, we know that you have to make money. But if
Yep.
these employees don't feel that they are part of an intricate part of the relationship, you ain't gonna make no money because you're not gonna have anybody to do
No.
it. Okay.
So it's
So
so true.
the days of we gotta, work, we gotta make it look very old school and it has to look like this. And, you know, I'm gentle on the return to office because that spins some people up. But,
I know.
do the employees have to be there 5 days a week? I mean, it's not for me to say, but you got to
Yeah.
know what your business case is, right? But if for synergy, if you want employees to come to the office, that's one thing. But, just to say, well, we need people back 5 days a week because we need to see what they're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, they're going to still
Mm-mm.
be shopping on Amazon. So what's the
Yes,
difference?
they are. That's
What
right. That's right.
they're still shopping on Amazon. So
Yep.
make the business case. And you're right, as an employer, you have the right, but do you have the right just because you're the head of the relationship? Like that ain't how that
Right.
works.
Mm-mm.
So
No.
employees, also em- that whole relationship thing. When you do that relationship, then when I can talk to you about my child who, may be experiencing diversity, or I'm a
Yes.
caregiver, or I'm feeling ill, or because I'm credible. See, here's the part. When I'm
Yeah.
here, employer, I'm credible. I perform for you at a high level. So don't make me choose. When it's a
Yes.
relationship, I shouldn't have to choose.
Mm-mm.
There should
No.
be synergy. And all
So
of these
true.
stations are getting lost in because this person don't look like me and I don't have any
Yeah.
familiarity with a person who looks like that. How could they possibly contribute to this box
Yeah.
when my perspective is they have no familiarity with this box? So the only
No.
reason why they can get in this box is because somebody opened it up for them.
Hey everyone, we're the Her Resources podcast, where women share real stories, real lessons, and the resources that help them succeed. We're always looking for inspiring women, business leaders, creatives, educators, and changemakers who want to share their journey and empower others. If that sounds like you, we'd love to hear your story. Reach out to us at contact@herresourcespodcast.com and let's start the conversation. Right, right. Well, and the thing that's interesting too is that what maybe employers aren't recognizing is the consequences of the rollback. So I get both sides, exactly what Justin was saying to you about how, and because I heard it from a lot of people as well, that they felt like it was being crammed down their throat, and that there were some things that maybe they didn't feel comfortable with. So like their pronouns, they don't feel the need to put. Okay, well then don't put your pronouns out there. But I think there was, because of all of this though, there is now a consequence to that rollback, and so there's a damage in the morale and trust that employees have with their employers. And that's across all employees, not just, certain dynamics or certain groups of people or just our Black and brown people. I mean, it is all employees are now feeling this damage to this morale and there's, to morale and trust. And then we've seen a setback in diverse talent because now we're starting to see a scale back in mentorship and sponsorship and leadership development programs. So that's going to really slow down our career progression. And then we're seeing reduced retention and attraction as well. So companies are struggling with them to attract and retain the top talent, especially in younger workers who really got behind a lot of these conversations and this direction. To your point, not so much calling it a movement as much as like a direction that we were heading, and they were really embracing this. And then, now we're seeing an increase in discrimination lawsuits coming out in the workplace again because of all of this happening. And so I do think that employers need to be wise about the decisions that they're making, and that, to your point, when the pendulum swings so widely from one side to the other, there are going to be consequences, and the fallout is what you're going to feel, and it is going to cost you dollars and cents.
All I'm going to say to what you said, Linda, is amen. Amen. I can't add to that. And again, I really enjoy, in my conversation with Justin, he was just saying that, in his conversations, that was
Yes.
experience that but people were saying that was rammed down his throat. But I love when he and I were talking, one of the things that he said was, and what we talked about, that unwillingness, or that it just appears to be that lost of and I said it too, but that lost of
Yeah,
curiosity, that
I
loss
agree.
of people. And he was sharing experience. He was sharing with me that when he travels, he meets so many amazing people, and it's in different parts of the world of the country. And, there's just natural engagement and conversation. And there's no feeling of, gosh, I don't know if I can say anything to you because of how you look. And the yearningness for that to be like an everyday
Yeah.
experience. And when he said that, that really, I really resonated with that, because in what we're talking about, it appears that this one faction has just overtaken everything else, when what we're saying is there's such a great need. There's such a great need. And to your point, I also think that it breeds for, or it allows for those to feel like we are really accomplishing something, because they
Yeah.
can see you can measure that.
So true. So
That's great.
true.
You can measure that. You can't
Yeah.
measure those other things we're talking about, the mentorship programs and the consequences that employ, the reverse in talent, right? You're saying you're not seeing a lot of talent, and organizations are now, you know, seeing high discrimination cases and,
Yep.
employees feeling burnouts at very high level.
Yes.
And the relationship is now starting to erode. The employer-employee relationship is starting to erode.
It is.
People don't want to admit it, but they are. It's going to start to
Yes.
erode because what is happening is one party is saying of the relationship, maybe the employer is saying, we gotta kind of, so I'm gonna use a natural relationship. We gotta kind of
Yes.
cheat on you. We gotta kind of cheat on
Mhm.
you a little bit because,
Yes.
you know, we don't want the wife to know. Come on, work with me. You know where I'm going with that. I gotta cheat on
I
you a little
do.
bit, but don't tell the
Yes.
wife. And the other party's over here, well, why would you cheat on me? We committed. And so this party over
Mhm.
here saying, okay, well, since you're gonna cheat on me,
Yes.
then I'm gonna throw a brick through your car window.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
you're just,
Yeah.
yes, right? In a relationship, you cheated on me, but don't tell the wife, don't tell the partner. Let me use the general. Don't tell my
Yeah.
partner.
My partner, sure.
Don't tell my partner over here because I got to do this because we got to stay together. I got to keep my money. You know things about me now.
Right.
You kind of low key blackmailing me, and then the
Uh-huh.
partner finds out like, how dare you? I've given you all of this, so now I'm gonna make things hard for you. I'm gonna throw a brick against your wall. I'm gonna blow up your phone, and I'm gonna go do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I
No.
think people may say that's a weird analogy, but for those of you who get it, if you know, you know. Exactly.
Absolutely. No, you're right. And I think, just to kind of like add a little extra to that is what we're seeing too is like the whole quiet quitting,
Right?
the,
Quitting. Yes.
all of, and right now, because there's so much economic certainty, there's some new, I don't know what the catchy new phrase is, but essentially like employees are holding on to their jobs that they're in now because they're so afraid of the economic certainty. But it doesn't mean that they're any more dedicated to you or working any harder or anything. It's just that they're afraid to make the leap to go somewhere else. And so you may have a lot of employees who are checked out and not really that engaged because, but they're afraid. They're afraid to leave now because there's so much economic uncertainty.
Yeah,
So,
it is.
yeah.
The face of work is very different. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that are different. However, what I want to inspire, I think one of the things we talked about is I want to inspire everybody. Please don't retreat.
Oh, I totally agree with you.
Don't
I do.
retreat.
And there are some companies who are still doing it right, right? I mean, like there are companies like Microsoft and Apple and Costco who have openly stated that they are committed to the values and the integrity around what they built to incorporate it into talent management and business practices. And there's some other organizations out there like Johnson and Johnson and HSBC and Intel. They're all still doing good things. To your point, they're not going backwards just because of this. Because just as you've experienced throughout your life, and I've experienced throughout mine, things are constantly ebbing and flowing, right? So this is a moment in time that we're dealing with, and then something is going to change, and we'll be dealing with a whole different aspect of this, right? So
You're right. I think, I I I I want to say, building on what you're saying, Linda, is when I'm saying don't retreat, right? There are organizations doing that. And I want to inspire those individuals out there who are working. Don't
yes,
talk about it. Be about it.
I like that. Yes.
In 2020, it was all these statements and all
Oh
of
my
these
goodness.
policies, and
Yes.
we're out in the forefront, and we're the organization who's doing that, and we're on our
No.
website, and you see all of this inclusiveness on our website. Those
Yes.
days are gone. You
They
can't
are.
talk about it anymore. You gotta
No.
be about it. You gotta have your action. It has to be done in action. You don't bring
I love
attention to
that.
yourself. You still gotta
Yes.
create in workplaces where your employees can thrive. That doesn't have
Yeah.
to be a poster on the front of your website, right?
No, it
It's
does
the
not.
action. And if
Yes.
it's truly done, your employees will feel that.
Yes.
And your
Yes, they will.
employees will take the message forward.
Yes, I totally agree, and I love that. It's about strategy, not symbolism, right? So just because you put some logo across your shirt, or even we watched with the NFL, it was plastered everywhere. I mean, the NFL has been dealing with issues around race and discrimination
Mhm.
for since its inception, right?
Mhm.
Those banners and those statements didn't change everything. It's the action
The act
behind it.
is
It's
that.
what are you doing to do something different? I love what you said there, because I think that's a big part of it is like really, I know some organizations have rebranded under belonging or inclusive culture, but I kind of feel a little bit like even culture is getting a bad rap these days. Like you can't even talk about culture, because if you say culture, then it's like, oh, well, what does that mean? Is that, are we leaning this way or leaning that way? And so, to exactly what you just said there, the best way to do all of this, which is kind of, I think, what was happening maybe a little bit pre 2020,
Mhm.
was there was just a lot of really positive actions that were happening, and you started to see a change and a shift in people's behavior. Now, I do think what happened, we talked about George Floyd, and we watched a man get murdered, and it was a pivotal point
It
that
was.
no one could ignore, because he was not the first Black man to get murdered. I mean, there's a litany
Yeah,
of Black
Aubrey
men and
Ahmaud, you
women
got
who
Breonna
have been
Taylor. I
murdered,
mean,
right?
I mean, it just goes on. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So I think that that became something that nobody could ignore, because it was all over social media, TV, it was everything. So you couldn't pretend it didn't happen, because you saw it happen.
Let me
And I
correct
think
his
that
name. His
was
name
the
is,
difference,
I'm
right?
sorry, I wanna correct his name. Is Ahmaud Arbery. I said his name wrong. I wanna give honor to
Ahmaud
his
Arbery.
name.
Yes,
Yes. So,
yes,
you had all
absolutely.
those things. Yeah. And I really want to use another one of those conversations. The strategy is important. So
Yes.
when you talk about strategies as an employer or as an employee, if I feel included in my workplace and I know that my partner rides for me, like I know that I
Yes.
may not see, and you're gonna get controversial. I may not see an outward expression in Black History Month. I may not
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah.
I don't see the symbol, but throughout
Right.
my work, I see the strategies. I see the work.
Yes.
Employees, this is where you come in the relationship. You may not see the outward acknowledgement. Inspire, but ensure that the organization is doing it, so you have people on your team that are representative. You got to
Yes.
understand that you
Yes.
might be in different times where you may not get this acknowledgement, because that's another thing to be, you know, co-opt or whatever. That's a conversation, right? That now if we don't, and organizations have to do a good job. That's why I'm saying don't talk about it, be about it.
Yeah.
We
I
may
like
not
it.
see it, but we have X, Y, and Z in our organization. We do this. This is our value statement, and we're living to that. It's almost like you're gonna have to keep family business. Period.
Very true.
It's 5 people who live in our house. We
Yes.
know what goes on in our house. We don't have a big sign
That's right.
outside to say that the Lewises do X, Y, and Z, but we know how we navigate in our home.
Absolutely.
Family business, family business, but make sure that the family is doing the business.
Yes, yes, I totally agree. That is such great advice. And I'm kind of like, what do you think is like one thing that leaders who are listening today could maybe do to make to make that shift where it is about what you're doing, not what you're saying? Like, how could you help some of those leaders to think about, because I do think it's a conversation that needs to be had within the family, but how do you broach that conversation? So if, especially if you're that leader who kind of shifted a little bit away, like maybe your board told you, maybe your leaders all got together and said, "Oh gosh, we gotta scale back on all of this stuff we were doing." How do you now kind of make that shift back to say, "Listen, we just want to make sure we're still here, we still care, this is what we're doing." It's not about that. Like, that's a hard conversation for leaders to have, don't you think?
I think in a measure, the first thing I would say is charity starts at home. Okay. So as a leader, you have to be honest. People that I work with, I have the honor to spend a lot of collaboration time, also known as coaching. I hate the word coaching because it's collaborating. And I always
Right.
tell my collaborators, before you make a decision, before you ever do them, identify your biases.
I like
Identify
that.
your bias. And I say that, Linda, because also in this work, one of the things that I know for sure that happened when we got is that because there was such this coming out the gate, there was an assumption that everybody was on board.
Yes, there was. That is such a good
There was
point.
an
Yes.
assumption that
Yeah.
everybody, and if you weren't, we were going to, right? Without
Yes.
providing the opportunity to say, hey, let me take somebody. Not necessarily my experience, but I want to, right? So
Yes.
some leaders are like, well, I had to kind of do it because I was told to do it.
Right.
We all saw it. We all
Yeah.
saw it. We knew that you weren't into it, right? So as a leader, be honest about where you are. That's
I
the
like
first
that.
thing. And allow people to be honest about where they are. And if you,
Yeah.
as a leader, do not feel that you are committed to this, then be honest about that. Now, here's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Then the people are going to say, like, how are you a leader and you're not committed to this, blah, blah, blah. That's supposed to be your job. Yeah, and I say yeah, and meaning the job, if the organization is taking a position or not taking a position, if the organization is saying that an inclusive workplace that fosters equity, right, for, our workers is one that we have,
Mhm.
and that we want our leaders to align with that, then have the conversations with the leaders. And I'm telling you, this is different type of thing, different type of thinking. Let's first start talk to the leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. I
What
think
does
that's
it
a
look
really
like
good
to you all?
point.
And create
Yeah.
spaces that are brave and then
Yes.
safe. Because you might say have a leader. I'm working on a matter right now where the leader the leaders has made a different perspective on this,
Mhm.
right? And so um I'm working with this person, and the person was like, you know what, Stacey, I really appreciate this. You're kind of the first person where I felt I can just say, I kind of haven't buttoned to this.
Yeah.
I said,
Yeah.
this is the start. See, and there was no retribution. They were like, wow, like, I really can say this to you. I'm not going back to their organization and telling them, oh my God, use my name, Stacey Lewis.
Right.
The job that this person I have now is to unpack that, right? And the unpacking is
Yeah.
because, again, managing bias. Doesn't really understand it, just was told it's something that they were supposed to do. And their personality is not what I want to get a better understanding. And whenever I try to talk about it, I'm pretty much approached with, well, you should just know.
Right.
Come on.
Right.
Come on. So if you're asking me the advice, first of all, identify where your bias is and identify truly where you are.
I like that. No, that's
Identify
really good.
truly where you are. And
Yeah.
then once you've done that, if you are in a space where you can
Mhm.
take the work forward, then develop strategies. And it cannot be on the job description, other duties as assigned. That is not what this
Right.
is. So
Yep.
once you've committed and you said as a leader, you know what, I've benefited from equitable workspaces. I've benefited from spaces that are psychologically responsible.
Yeah.
Okay. You say I didn't use the word psychologically safe because that would mean that only one person is responsible in the relationship. It's psychologically
Yes.
responsible for both parties, but that's another podcast, right?
Right.
Right? And you engage in all of those things. So my thought is have those conversations. That's where you start. And
Yeah.
you start applying that to your leadership, to your conversations. And it shouldn't be a standout. It should be an included in the same way that you can drop the budget, the same way that you can make a case, the same way that you can talk about KPIs, the same way that you can bring down metrics, the same way that you look at data will be the same way that you are looking through all of those from a lens of equity. It's not a separation. That's
Yeah.
how you
Yeah.
do it. But it has to be in intentional. Now, here's what you're going to get. Stacey, the intentional part is that we have to do it. Well, aren't you intentional on the information that you give to your leaders?
Right.
Aren't you
Yeah.
intentional on when you stand before, whether it's council, whether it's your CEO, whether it's your board, use some intentionality about what you're going to deliver? What's different than this?
Right. That's so
See,
true.
we want to make it an excuse. We want
Yes,
to
we
make it an
do.
excuse, and I'm gonna call you on that. I'm gonna call Uncle on that.
Yeah.
Don't say that.
Yeah.
The intentionality is the problem I have. No, you're not gonna stand up in front of anybody and just say anything. So
Right.
treat this as such. If it is something you align with. Now, if it's not, then
So
two type of
true.
things. If the organization is moving this way and you're not in line with it, maybe you need to do something else. Right? I don't know, right?
That is true. We all have choices, right?
We all have
And
choices,
that also is a great point because you
but
don't
don't be
have to work for, not all organizations are going to align with your beliefs and how you feel about things. And if that's not okay with you, go somewhere else. Like you don't have to stay there.
you know, right. Exactly. You don't have to stay there. And if you're gonna stay there, don't be a problem. Don't be messy.
Yep.
Don't do it.
Yeah. Nope.
Like
Nope. That's
just
right. That's
don't be
right.
messy. And then organizations, let's go on the converse side. On organizations,
Mhm.
let's go back to everybody has right perspective. If this is what you're doing, don't change.
Right.
I mean, stay to your truth, but
Yep.
also, stay to your truth.
Yep.
Don't be calling
Yep.
people out and making it just the culture. And I hate when we move away from culture because culture is what's allowed. That's really all
It is.
culture is. That's why I
I
hate that word.
agree.
It's co-opt. That's all
Hmm.
culture is in an organization is what is allowed.
So true. That is a really great point. No, it's true. I wonder, Stacey, and this might seem obvious, but I'm curious, like, do you think that other than the fact that I know that the reason why it leans back so much into race, because you brought a great point, it's because what we can see, right? So we can see people who look different, but we don't always know what's going on inside of people. But do you think that sometimes that the reason why we lean so heavily on our Black and brown and other visually identifiable differences on all of you to lead the charge is because you understand you have a you like, I feel like we put an awful lot of pressure on you to be the one to lead us into the new world, the new chapter, right? Where we should take responsibility for that if we're dealing with those things. But do you think that some of that is it? Because if you've not dealt with not understanding what it feels like to be discriminated against or to be excluded or that you can't possibly understand how to lead that movement. But I'm just curious, like, does an inordinate amount of pressure get put on people that look different than I do?
Okay, so about what I hear you saying is, so I think here are two things. First of all,
Yeah.
let me add first thing. Rate. I'm just going to say this, right? America, whether we want it or not, foundationally, we've driven a lot of decisions by race. Okay,
Yes, we
we
have
agree with that.
100%.
It drives
Yep,
almost
I'm in
everything.
total alignment with you. I'm 100% agree with
I
you.
think that's a
Yes,
very safe way to say it. It is the
I
lead
agree.
in of okay. The
Yes.
second piece is there because of that, is there often a lot of questions or a lot of pressure put on maybe individuals who look like me, right? Identify as
Yeah.
historically underestimated or marginalized communities to answer the questions or to validate, right?
Mhm.
And I will say this. There are times, and I'm just going to speak for myself. Um, I am always willing to have conversation, like I told you, healthy conversations
Yes.
about, because time already goes back to race. I'm willing to do that. What I'm not willing to do, and I think this what Phil is, I'm not willing to have this conversation 20 times.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
Because at some
Yes.
point that shows me that you're not willing to do the work. I started this out by saying, as we've been doing this and I've been preparing in the work that I've done, I have a circle of individuals around me that identify as
Yeah.
white cisgender men. That
Yep.
is purposeful because I have to often manage my bias. Okay.
Yes.
And if I'm going to do this work, because I love this work and I'm going to do it well, then I'm not going to be a hypocrite.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
I
like
have the
that.
Justin Grays of the world who I can call him and say, me and him have straight talk. And I'm going to say, okay, this happened. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, not another time. He's like, okay, cool, Stace. Okay, 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 okay. Let's unpack this. Take this perspective. And that's what right? And so I get to understand. And sometimes I'm like, I can't with that one. He goes, okay, but
Yeah.
at least you were willing to have the conversation. See, here's it is. I don't have to accept it. But if I ask
Yes.
him the question, then I can't go to him and say, well, that ain't my experience. I don't know. Well, then why did you ask me? Well,
Yes.
conversely, on the other side, if you come to me and I often, let's go back to Justin. Justin's like, hey, or I have quite a few
Yeah.
people who, um, that are well in, and they're like, Stacey, like one of the individuals, he called me, he's like, okay, walk me through this whole woke thing. Like, what happened with this whole, and I said, okay, let's talk about that. Like, I
Sure.
appreciate that. And he's like, oh, okay. Or I had, one of my, I call him one of my guys. He was like,
Yeah.
mm, okay, I'm kind of, I'm, I don't want you, he said, quote, I don't want you to be mad, but I'm moving with this rollback of this DEI. Well, you gonna be mad at me? And I love this, right? And I was like, no. He said, look, you want to talk? And I said, I do. So I say that as we're talking about that, right? And I
Yeah.
gave him some things to
Yes.
do. They give me some things. So I think asking that, because they don't know what it's like to be a Black
Yeah.
Afro Latino woman. I don't know what it's like
Yep.
to be a white male. But
Yeah.
I can't come 50 times and ask the same question. That's showing I'm not doing the work. There's so much information out there that you can do if you want to do the work. And that's where
Yeah.
people get frustrated.
I like that.
I'm not
Yeah.
meant to educate every uh, white person in America about being Black. I will have a conversation with you about it, right?
Yes.
And if there's some lived experiences, but I'm not going to have the conversation with you 20 times. Now, some people will say, I'm not having it one time. That's you can. But if somebody
Absolutely.
asks me genuinely, I want to share my experience.
Yeah.
True story. When I told you about, we had the conversation with the gentleman who talked about the firefighter. That was such a
Right.
wonderful space we shared. We were talking about microaggressions.
Okay.
And one of the individuals like, oh, I don't really understand. I said, okay, so I'm gonna give you a couple of analogies. And I shared with him, with the group, that I went to jury duty. I had my
Uh-huh.
badge in my pocket. I had walked out the bathroom and I was drying my hands. I didn't take the badge out of my pocket. And the security officer looked me in my face, Linda, and said, child support services are around the corner.
Oh
Didn't
my
say
God,
hello.
Stacey.
He didn't say
Oh,
anything. Child support services are around the corner.
holy cow. Wow.
The
Wow,
room got
wow, wow.
silent. So when you won't understand that, because you're going to get the benefit of the doubt because they didn't say that to you, right?
Right.
So
Yes,
when
yes.
we're saying it's exhausting, we're not making these things up. I used another example of, I was at the grocery store because
Mhm.
I do HR. I hustle and ear hustle better than anyone, and I'm a mother. So
Yeah.
that's a trait you got to have.
Yes, absolutely. No, for sure.
But I was in the grocery store, the line was long, and I just like to people watch because I love people.
Yeah.
I just love
Yeah.
people.
You have
And
to do the work that you do, honestly,
oh, I do.
Stacey.
I love
Yeah.
saying good morning to people, and they're just like, what? I always say good morning. I'm just that energy. But I'm watching the line, and the lady's going through the line, and she's talking with everybody, everything. And I get to the line. She don't say
Mhm.
anything to me. I say hello. You know what she says? She goes, you
Mm.
can swipe your EBT card now. I'm not making this up.
Oh my God. Holy
I looked through the line. There's
cow.
probably about 5 people ahead of me, and I know for a fact, right? And I'm not. And she's like, "You swipe your EBT card now." Now, I will say, in this instance, I had time that day, and I was about to go there.
Yeah.
But if I would have went there, I wouldn't have been no better than her. See, that's what, right? But
That's
sometimes you
and
just
that's a
let me
good
just
point.
sometimes
That's a
you just
valid point. Yep. Yeah.
sometimes you got to
Yeah.
do it. So people go there, you just do
Yes.
it. And I was like, oh
That's
my
right.
gosh, because I was about to tell her, lady, I got probably more money in my purse than you probably ever seen. That's what I was going to tell her.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
wouldn't been any better than her. And so I just
You're
said, I
right.
said, well, what would make you, I did. I said, what would make you think I have an EBT card?
Right. What did she say?
And she was just like, I just thought you did. I said, well,
Because
I don't.
she was not courageous enough. She was ignorant enough to say to you such a stupid remark like take out, but then not courageous enough to say because you're Black. And I think that you are clearly have an EBT card. Like if you're gonna put yourself out there, people, then be bold enough to take it all the way
Thank
there,
you,
right?
Linda. I will respect you for that because I already know.
Yes.
Then that's
Yep.
how we can have the conversation.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
so in that conversation, when I was telling with the team, I was like, these are experiences that if I'm asked about, I will. But you'll make the assumption, if we don't talk about it, then you won't know. And then you're gonna
Yes.
wonder why I'm angry. And I'm saying I'm so frustrated and it's so exhausting because every day I have to validate my existence. I
Right.
gave you one last story about my son. Well, I won't even use my son. I was working at an organization. It was myself
Yeah.
and another individual. We walked in the elevator, and I'm not making. I won't. One thing I don't ever do is lie. We walked into the
No.
elevator at one of my companies. A lady walked in the elevator, and I think she was she was making a joke, and she
Yeah.
said, because the other gentleman was a Black gentleman, and he was our director of communications, and she said, "Oh my gosh, the bus drivers around here dress so well." Exactly what she said.
Oh my god.
He's the director of
Holy
communications.
cow.
I'm
I
in
just
there. She said, and we just walked out.
yeah.
People say, that didn't happen. No, nobody makes up stuff like that.
No, nobody makes up stuff like that.
Like we
No, there's
don't
no
we don't
purpose
want to
in
make
making
up
stuff
that.
like that up. Yeah.
So when
No.
you're asking
Wow.
about, how do we have the conversations, I think you create that and be willing to
Yes.
at least talk about it.
Yeah.
Um, and willing to share. Some people are not willing to share. And so I
That's
will say,
true.
if a person's not willing to share, don't force them. Some of these things
No.
are so traumatic. Some of these lived experiences
And
are
that's
very
true.
difficult.
That's a really valid point too. If you haven't experienced it, it is trauma, and not everybody deals with trauma the same way. And it's unfair for me to expect you to share your pain to educate me if that's not what you want to do. Yeah,
But
yeah,
if you
that's
want
a
to
really
learn,
great
if
point.
you have somebody in your circle who wants to learn, conversely, I would inspire you, don't deny them of the opportunity. You don't
I
have to
like
answer
that.
5
Yeah,
times. I agree with that.
that's right.
There's work out there, direct them, but to just do the immediate shut off of, I'm not going to answer that for you. I don't subscribe to that because then how do
Yeah,
we heal? How do we learn?
that's
Right?
so true.
If I would have
Yeah,
asked Justin or those gentlemen that question, and they're like, I'm not going to tell you that. Then you know what I would have done? I would have leaned to my biases. I would have
yes,
leaned to
yeah,
my own bias, and my bias would have been quit complaining because you have everything, right? That would have been
yes,
my bias. But
yes.
no, right?
Yeah,
And I
no.
managed that. And I'm
That's a really good point, and I think it's showing, each other a little bit of grace because I know even as things really kinda started to come out with, they, them, and the gender and all of that, for my husband and I, we didn't grow up in that environment, well, most of us didn't, like any of us who are of a certain age didn't grow up with that type of conversation, so it's a new experience for us, and I think it's important to understand that as well, so show a little grace in the situation. Now, if we continue to do it every single time we saw him, then yeah, now it is a deliberate choice that we're making because we're choosing not to respect how that person
mhm, mhm,
felt.
mhm.
But if in that moment I make a mistake and just show me a little bit of grace because I'm going to be willing to learn. And if I don't, then you don't have to have a relationship with me going forward, and that's perfectly okay too, right?
I love that, Linda. Very similar situation. One of my clients, one of the gentlemen I was talking about, he called me and he goes, "I- same thing happened." And he was misgendering a person. And he said the person became very irate.
Yes.
And he said, he said, I felt bad. He goes, but when I thought about it, that would have been, a good opportunity for that person to educate me because they're
Yes.
living that
Yeah.
experience. I don't know
Exactly.
anybody like that.
No.
And I said, well, it all depends. A person has the right to navigate the way that they want to. But he goes, I really, I felt bad and I apologized and I didn't have a relationship with the person. They were so upset with me. I guess, you say about the giving grace. And so it is. If people want to give grace and like you said, apologize. Now, if you continue to do it, then that you are showing that
Yes,
you don't want to do that. I always tell people that I work with, I just really be mindful to try to use people's names, right?
I agree, and that's a
I
great way to avoid it.
I
Yes,
just use
exactly.
people. I do this work all the time, and a couple of times, I've misgendered individuals, so I'm really mindful of just using people's names because
Yes,
this is a good way to. And I'm not saying we're close, but something to consider. One of the things that I also think has happened in this work is we've made it a zero-sum game. If Linda doesn't
that
believe
is
like
true.
me, then there's something wrong with her. She
That
needs to
is
know
very
what it's
true.
like for me to be a Black in America, and she should know. Period.
Yes,
We made
that
it a
is true.
zero-sum game. My approach that I've seen it be very successful is you won't know because you're not gonna have experience. Nobody's not gonna tell you that child support when you come out of jury duty, okay? They're not gonna say that. So with that being said, is at the bare minimum, and I said this earlier, we need to be in a place to bring about awareness.
I
Everything
like that.
starts with awareness
Yes, yes,
because there are, when you talk about awareness, some of these biases, some of these beliefs, not even some of a lot of them have been ingratiated in us since my daddy, rest his soul, were knee high to a tadpole. My
yeah,
grandma told me,
yeah,
abuela them told me, all these people told me how framed my belief system. So
yes,
how in
yes,
the world is Stacey Lewis from HR Interrupted gonna come in here in a 3-hour training talking about understanding bias? Don't change that. Please.
yeah, yeah.
You wasting my time. No.
So true.
So all Stacey Lewis is asking in you is to have an awareness that
Yeah,
there are different lived experiences. I'm
right,
not asking you
right.
to accept. I'm not asking you to tolerate. I'm just
Yeah,
bringing to that to have an awareness and acknowledge. Didn't say accept, acknowledge that
yes,
is
acknowledge. Yeah,
Stacey's lived experience. That's all
right.
you have to do. The only thing that you can never do, that you cannot do in this work, is cause intentional harm.
Yes, yes, yes. I
And
totally agree.
we know when we're causing harm.
Yes, we do.
That
No, you're
we
absolutely right.
keep
Yeah,
misgendering me and you laughing. Or you
yes,
keep, every time you see me, you refer to me as so and so, or you
yes.
know that I have a neurodiverse, and I have
Mhm.
and so you make fun of it, right? Or
Yes,
you whatever my situation is, you know that I
so
have a
true.
child at home who's suffering, and so you bring jokes about it, or you bring it up in conversation. You're
Yes,
causing harm. You
yes,
That's the only thing you can never do. And the people under the sound of our voice who are leaders, you hope that happens on your watch because you see
yes.
it happen. You cannot cause intentional harm. Other than that, if you don't want to call
Yeah,
me by a gender, call me Stacy. If you
exactly.
don't
Call me
want
by
to
my name.
right, call me
Yeah,
by my name.
yep,
It get too difficult. It's been made too
yeah.
difficult. So
I like
just
that.
curious.
No, I could talk to you all day long.
What?
But but I am so grateful to have you on the show because what I love about who you are is that you share your insight and your truth. But it's so refreshing in what you're out there and that you haven't stopped one bit of being Stacey Lewis and doing the work because you're right. The work still has to be done. It doesn't need a fancy slogan or a T-shirt. It just needs to be done. And thank you. Thank you for being out there doing it.
And thank you so much, Linda. And just make sure in this, everybody has a voice. Everybody
Yes.
has a voice. Even if they don't want to have even if they don't believe that they have a voice,
Yeah.
everyone
Yes.
has a voice. And just, make sure that leaders that you're looking at work as a relationship. And if you
Yeah.
wonder what that looks like, think about one of the relationships that you have that means a lot to you. Think about how that relationship was established. How do you bring your employees in, right? The cycle of a personal relationship is the cycle of work. And I think when leaders in organizations and those that are sitting in places of influence and impact start thinking of work as a relationship and not a
Yes.
transactional moment, we'll start garnering and we're getting to the places that we want to be in this space. So, Lynn, I thank you for, you doing this podcast and opening up. Um, continue to stay out there and provide the information, all you do is bring about awareness. This was not meant to
That's it.
challenge anybody's beliefs.
Nope.
Your conversation is not meant to tell anybody they're wrong. All we
Yeah.
need to do, my final statement is, please, everybody, continue to activate your intellectual curiosity about others. You do that, we'll
I
be in a good
love that. That is just such a great way to end the show, and, I just wanna thank all of our listeners out there, and if you like this episode, like, share, follow, comment, always love to hear back from you as well, and so, thanks, again, Stacey, for being here, and thanks to all of our listeners out there, and we will see you on the next episode of the Her Resources podcast. Thanks, everyone. You've been listening to the Her Resources podcast, where women's voices, leadership, and growth take center stage. As your host, I'm here to remind you that the journey isn't always easy, but it is always worth it. Every step you take to build confidence, create impact, or use your voice is part of a much bigger story. It's the one that inspires others to do the same. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love it if you subscribed, left a review, or shared it with another woman who's ready to step into her power. And as always, thank you for being a part of this community. Together, we're not just changing conversations, we're changing the future.